Welcome to Live from Your Laptop. Hear straight from Klaviyo's community of some of the fastest growing brands and partners about how they're growing their e-commerce business and owning their destiny. Hosted by Morgan Lasky, for today's episode, we welcome Dr. Squatch.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Live from Your Laptop. We're going to have some fun and learn new things in this next short hour together. My name is Alex McPeak, and I am filling in for Morgan this week. I'm a content strategist here at Klaviyo. I'll be your host for the next hour, and I'm really excited for the show today because I have a ton of questions for our guests. But I do want to know who from the community is joining today and where in the world you're tuning in from. So feel free to turn those videos on and pop in the chat who you are, where you are, and what company you're with. So today on Live from Your Laptop, we are joined by the Senior Manager of Lifecycle Marketing at Dr. Squatch, Drew Cowan. You may remember this brand's hilarious Super Bowl ad. They're really raising the bar for their marketing strategy, and they have seen tremendous growth over just the last few years. We had to have them on the show so they can give us some insight into their marketing so that we can help and inspire everyone in the Klaviyo community who is growing their business. There were some great questions that some of you submitted when you registered, so I was inspired by those, and we'll make sure to get some of them answered. If you think of a question while we're chatting, just drop it in the chat, and if we have time to get to it, I will try to, but otherwise feel to go back and forth with the other people in the chat if you want to. After the chat, we're showering you with some body care tips and tricks that you'll definitely want to implement into your routine. Then after, we'll wrap it up with a giveaway question, which 2 lucky winners will win a shower essentials bundle valued at $72 per kit. And you'll want this one for sure. So let's jump in. We have so much to talk about. Drew, welcome to the show. How are you? Please introduce yourself.
Hey, yeah, thanks, Alex. I'm happy to be here, and hello, everyone else on this lovely Zoom call. My name's Drew Cowan. Like Alex said, I'm the Senior Manager of Lifecycle Marketing for Dr. Squatch. I've been at the company for a little under a year now, but it's been an exciting, amazing journey so far, and can't wait to continue the growth. Before working for Dr. Squatch, I worked for a digital performance marketing agency, and prior to that, I worked for a small eco-friendly home goods company. So have a little bit of experience in the space, but loving my time at Squatch so far.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us. So can you start out by telling us a little bit more about Dr. Squatch? How did the company start? When you started, what was your primary responsibility?
Yeah, definitely. So Dr. Squatch was founded by Jack Haldrup. Fun fact, he is not the blonde guy that you see in most of our videos. That is not our founder, but our founder's name is Jack. And he actually started the company while he was dealing with his own psoriasis, which is an autoimmune skin disorder. So that's really how he became interested in natural products and in the space. He eventually found natural cold processed soap at a farmer's market and decided to give it a go. It did help ease a lot of his symptoms. So he kind of started playing around with making his own. And then he found a space in the market and really just figured that if he had this issue, there were probably other guys that also had the same issue or similar issues that maybe weren't as familiar with the natural product space. So that's how Dr. Squatch came to be. Since then, we have launched Beyond Soap. So we have a few different product categories now. All geared towards men, although I will say that I use them myself. And at Dr. Squatch, my key responsibility is really focusing on life cycle. So really looking at email, SMS, loyalty, referral, and just really trying to hone in on sending the right person the right message at the right time, trying to convert people to make a purchase, and then really focus on retention and LTV as well.
Fantastic. And what a great story. So let's start out here by talking a little bit about your YouTube channel. So the Dr. Squatch YouTube channel has over 56,000 subscribers and 136 million video views, which doesn't even count the Super Bowl video, which we'll get to later. But when thinking through the content for the brand, what type of content have you seen resonate best with your audience? How does that influence other channels such as email and social media? And what does the calendar look like, the content calendar look like at Dr. Squatch?
Yeah, so Jack from the get-go really wanted to deliver the type of brand that was focused on the great products that we sell, as well as educating men, but also one that never took itself too seriously. So that's kind of how we frame the content that we work with today. So we have found that kind of like the funnier videos that lean into humor tend to resonate with our audience the best. But you'll notice that in all of the content that we push out, we're always kind of going back to our value proposition. So the natural ingredients in our products, the scent variety, the fact that we have a subscription. So we always kind of tie it back to what our product does and why we created it in the first place. And then the content calendar and kind of how we work that. So the calendar itself, we kind of work with different product launches that we might have come up, different partnerships. So we focus on kind of the bigger pictures first and work backwards from there, as far as like the larger scale videos that you might see, or the larger, email campaigns, for example. And then we'll create different videos and kind of parse it out and turn that into something that we can use on our different paid media channels, as well as email, as well as SMS. And then, we're always testing and creating like other creative as well.
That's awesome. I love that. So that kind of leads me to my next question. So aside from your YouTube content, you have some other pretty cheeky and playful content, kind of like you mentioned on your social media channels like Instagram. So like, how do you strike that balance between just right and maybe, too much, or like taking things too far and going outside your brand voice too much?
Yeah, so I think it just really comes down to the fact that we've honed in on our audience at this point. And again, like we really know what we want our company to stand for. So we will test different things and like try to push the envelope and, see how far we can push some of that humor sometimes, but we never lose sight of like the core of who we are and what our audience expects from us. So I think that that's kind of how we keep that balance in check.
That's great. And then what about like paid versus organic? What are some tips for getting your paid ads noticed?
Testing, and more testing. So our paid media team looks at performance on a weekly basis and then optimizes from there. So there's not a day, a week, to be honest, like an hour that goes by that we don't have someone looking at our performance and kind of helping those metrics and then those metrics then help us inform like our next decision and how we choose to optimize. So that's really what I would suggest.
Yeah, we are big advocates of testing here. So I love that you guys are kind of doing that, on a consistent basis, continuously thinking about that and implementing those changes. So everybody, I'm sure, wants to know about the super popular out of the box and funny Super Bowl commercial you did. You're Not a Dish, it was called. The feedback on your social channels was so positive in response to this big time ad. We have so many questions about this, but first let's pull up the ad and watch it.
Your soap is ugh, and your body wash is a synthetic detergent, but you're not a dish. You're a man. Switch to Dr. Squatch natural soap for men who build things. Open pickle jars on the first try. Slay dragons and let their daughters braid their hair. Men who like to feel good and smell titillating. Dr. Squatch takes you places you never thought you'd go. Naked.
So this is great. The pickle jar really hits home for me. I can never get those open. And a few people in the comments have seen it as well and love it. So, a few questions about this one. So how did you get a high demand commercial spot during the 2021 Super Bowl? What was that process like?
Yeah, so I personally take zero credit for making the commercial happen. But it was really our head of growth, our CMO, Jack. Everyone worked very extensively on a few things, like forecasting the potential impact that this could have on our business was one thing that they looked at. And then kind of how the idea of a Super Bowl commercial even came up, from the get-go was we have it as a goal for this year to really make Dr. Squatch a household name. So when the Super Bowl idea came up, everyone thought that this was a really great avenue to kind of explore that and get our brand in front of more eyes than we possibly could. So from there, again, our head of growth spoke to, tons of different partners, different people in the space, different networks before, we finally finalized the spot and got the green light.
That is awesome. So how did your team prepare for the impact of traffic on Super Bowl Sunday to your website? I can only imagine what that was like.
Yeah, so I will say that it was definitely like a whole company-wide effort. So, I mean, outside of just traffic to the site, our product team had to get involved with, do we have enough product? Like, we have so much traffic coming to the site, like, do we even have the product available? Our customer support team had to kind of like double, triple their efforts to make sure that we could support the traffic coming that day. The marketing team had to get ready to push on, all of the channels and kind of do big pushes there. And then as far as the website goes, so the product manager who manages our whole website spoke with Shopify to kind of set expectations, make sure that we can handle the traffic. They also implemented something called Edge Mesh, tongue twister, which helps boost site speed. They did a lot of stress and load testing with Recharge to make sure that we could function, because we do have the whole subscription side of our business. And then they also reviewed some SEO pieces and made Google Search Console improvements the week before, just to help optimize the whole push, basically.
Wow. So a lot of moving parts there, but what cool opportunity for your brand.
Yeah, it was awesome. It was really fun to see the commercial go live, and everyone was, slacking each other the day of and taking videos of, our families watching it and our friends watching it. So it was a really cool experience, definitely.
Yeah, I can only imagine. So getting into Klaviyo a little bit, email and the data in Klaviyo have been a turning point for your brand, not to mention the hilarious content you work in helping to build your brand's identity. So let's start with growing your list. You featured the Dr. Squatch quiz. Can you explain the idea behind this initial form on your website and what you do with the data collected from it? We're going to show everybody the form so you can see kind of what it looks like.
Yeah, so the whole idea of a quiz, I think it's become more popular just in e-commerce in general, from what I've been keeping my eye on. We've had the quiz on the site for a while now, and I think the main idea there was we wanted to have an interactive experience for people who came to our site. So we wanted to be able to implement something that was a little bit of fun and kind of spoke to our brand voice and, again, kind of what we stand for. And I think that the quiz seemed like a really great way to do this. And then aside from it just being, a fun thing to do, we collect a lot of data. So all of the questions, we, collect people's answers, and that all gets ported through to Klaviyo. So we know, for example, that Alex, your scent profile might be one thing and mine might be a different thing. And then at the end of the quiz, we're able to kind of give a more personalized product recommendation. So we have a personalized bundle that we show at the end of the quiz. And then we pull, again, all of that information into Klaviyo along with a unique link for each person that then takes them back to the site where they can basically have access to all of the products that the quiz recommended for them.
Awesome. I love how thoughtful that strategy is. I love taking a quiz, and then, I love getting my personalized results after, getting the email follow-up with it, getting back to the site where I need to be. So it sounds like it all really comes together very nicely. So in terms of segmenting and flows, you have a ton of flows and segments you use. What are the top 3 things businesses should keep in mind when thinking of and creating segments, in your opinion?
Yeah, so I think the number one thing is, why are you creating the segment in the first place? So I don't think there's very much point to create a segment just to create a segment, for example. So really trying to think of what's the goal behind the segment that you're creating is the first thing. The second thing is, are you going to be speaking to people differently? So even if it's something as simple as someone who's made a purchase before versus someone who hasn't, if you're going to create those segments, it's great to see that data, yes, but then are you also going to, give different messaging to these different groups, and kind of how are you going to use the information you have? And then I think the other important thing is also looking at engagement level. So if you look at people who have purchased one time ever, for example, within that group, there's probably a subset that are like highly engaged in email or actively going to your site versus those who are completely unengaged. So I think that's the other thing to be very mindful of, because we don't want to send, too many emails out to people that aren't engaged, because then that could have a whole like pretty awful effect on deliverability. So I would say those are kind of the top 3 things that I would recommend thinking of when it comes to creating different segments.
Yeah, definitely. That's such a good point. I love how you talk about, speaking a little bit differently towards your different segments too, because there are little ways that you can kind of do that. Even if you're not changing the entire email for different segments, you can kind of tweak things.
Exactly.
So let's talk about your one-time purchase flow. It's a pretty large flow, so we can go over your strategy when setting this up and what kind of segments are included in it. And we're going to show you an example of that as well.
Yeah, so this flow, it's large. I know that a lot of you guys can't obviously see like the whole flow map that we have set up, but I think it has somewhere around 25-ish emails within the whole flow. And the whole goal of this particular flow is to speak to customers who make what we at Squatch call a one-time purchase. So that means they're not a subscription customer. They've come to the site and maybe purchased, just a few bars of soap and a deodorant. And the main segments we have set up are looking at someone who it was like their first purchase with us versus is it a repeat purchase? So that's kind of the main split that we have, so that we can send the different audiences different offers, different content. And then what you're not seeing in these email previews as well is we're using show hide blocks in many of the emails, so that if, for example, I bought soap, but I didn't buy deodorant yet, I can show more deodorant content. So it's a fairly complex flow setup. I think it's probably one of the more complex flows that I've ever set up. And I've been in the space for, oh my God, I don't even know now, since 2014. So I've been doing it a while. But we've seen some really great results so far. It really just helps us hone in on our cross-selling and upselling based off of people's purchase behavior.
Yeah, this is awesome. I love the little GIFs. It just looks so good. And that's a great tip with the show hide blocks as well. Definitely something that people can consider using. So moving on to campaigns, what specifically are you using campaigns for? A question from the community was, what is your sending cadence for campaigns and how do you balance that with flows?
Yeah, so I will say that we send quite a few campaigns out, not always to the same segments by any means, but we are definitely on like the higher end of the spectrum, I would say, as far as our cadence goes. And the campaigns themselves are focused, I guess, on a few different pieces. So product launches, we definitely push pretty heavy on. So whether it be a new soap scent, for example, or a whole new category, like when we launched deodorant, we do tend to push pretty heavy on the launches themselves, just to kind of help product adoption, because that's a big focus. So we send, anywhere from 2 to 5 emails a week, depending on, again, if it's a promotion, if it's a product launch. I will say it's like very important to highlight that it's not every single person getting all 5 of those emails every time we do this. Someone will probably get like 2 or 3, I would say, on average, maybe 4, depending on kind of what bucket you fall into. And then for weeks where we don't have a huge product launch or we don't have a huge partnership that we're trying to push, for example, we're really trying to focus on a lot of the education piece of our brand. So we have a blog on our website that we, try to put information that we think will be informative and helpful to our customer base, or someone who maybe is like a little unsure about the natural product space. So we'll try to push that content as well. And then balancing campaigns and flows is tricky for sure. I think one thing that we look at is like which message should take priority and for which audience. So if you've never bought from us before, and I think that we just launched an amazing scent that people will really love, I might choose to have everyone get the campaign about that new scent, because that might be the thing that kind of pushes you over the edge and gets you to convert. I I think that we use smart sending in a pretty special way, I guess, or something that I haven't seen before. So we will purposely have the first couple emails of the flow not have smart sending on it because we want people to get that information regardless. And then on the campaign side, we'll kind of pick and choose which ones we want smart sending on. Again, but like dependent on how important we think it is for someone to receive that message.
That's a super interesting use of smart sending. I really like it.
Yeah. Gamify it a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. And somebody else asked in community, this chat box down here too, is there anything besides smart send you use to make sure your campaign strategy doesn't detract from the flow specific messaging, or is it mostly just smart send?
For us, it's mostly smart send for now. I will say, like, we did some pretty extensive flow auditing, like internally, and pulled, X number of customer profiles just to get a sense of how many emails is someone getting in a given day or a week. And so we've made adjustments from there on like timing between emails in a flow, for example, or when we use smart sending and when we don't, just so that someone doesn't get, 4 emails in one day. Like we're doing something wrong if that's the case, unless it's done, intentionally for a flash sale or something like that. So I think it's important, and that's like a nice way to check, is just pull some profiles and see how many emails are people actually getting and when, to kind of help gauge how you handle some of that.
Yeah, that's a great tip. I love that. And then kind of piggybacking off that question too, in such a saturated market of e-commerce businesses, how do you make your emails stand out in the inbox?
So I'll go back to testing and more testing. So we are constantly testing subject lines. So we'll pick kind of different themes of what we want to test and roll those out over, a month, 2 months, however long we think we need to actually get a statistically significant result. We're also testing content. So whether it be, an email that has a GIF versus an email that doesn't have a GIF, or like a product image versus a lifestyle image that showcases James, who's the blonde guy that you see in all of our ads. So we'll test content. And then we have tested as well, different send times, like when do we think that people will actually open our emails? So we've done all of the above to kind of make sure that we are getting the results that we want. And then I think another thing is we focus pretty heavily on deliverability. So if we see, major dips in certain KPIs, that's a really good indicator that we might be running into some inboxing issues. So we kind of keep our eye on that as well.
That's great. And yeah, I feel like the answer whenever in doubt is always testing.
Totally. Yeah. Because something that works for us, like, might not work for some of you guys. So I would say, definitely make sure that you do your due diligence and test for your own audience as well, because it very well could be different.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think speaking of, testing for your own business and, comparing to your own business, but I think that is a great segue into benchmarks. So I really would love to dig into that. You guys heavily use this to measure your performance within Klaviyo, to analyze your account data in relation to industry trends and companies similar to your own. By seeing how different aspects of your account perform, how does this help you prioritize efforts in the areas where you are using Klaviyo to its maximum potential in the areas that need improvement?
Yeah, so I think the biggest, use case that we've had for benchmarks as of right now is there's just so much that we want to do. And I think that a lot of brands run into this when you're in such a fast growing, like hyper growth phase of the business. There's just so much going on that you can't do everything at once. So what we use benchmarks for is really to help indicate, where are we doing a really great job and where we maybe not doing so well, to kind of help shift focus and prioritize the list of, X number of projects that we have on our plate. And I think the other thing is, because you can look at benchmarks on, a monthly basis, it's a really good indicator to see if there's been any major like spikes or drops in what you're doing. So if all of a sudden one of your top performing flows like tanks, that's a really good way to check it, to then kind of hone in and dig into like, what is the issue here? Because you didn't have that issue maybe last month. So I think that those are probably the key ways that we're using benchmarks right now. And it really just helps us prioritize some of the projects that we have.
This is great. So thank you so much for explaining that to us. I know that a lot of the Klaviyo community is really excited about benchmarks, and it's going to be such a great opportunity. Somebody asked in the chat, how often are you checking benchmarks?
We check it on a monthly basis, I would say. I'm kind of in the boat that in order on the email side of things, it's a little bit different than paid media, where paid media, you can see results like pretty quickly. Sometimes on the like life cycle or email side, if you think of a particular flow, your flow might cover 6-month time frame, where like you don't necessarily see all of the results that you need to make a decision after a week. So we look at it on a weekly basis, but check benchmarks probably on like a monthly basis.
Great. Yeah, that makes sense. And then somebody else asked, what are the most important benchmarks and KPIs you check?
I think that I probably look at open rate, conversion rate the most, and click-through rate. I think that those are probably the top 3 that I look at, just because those are some of the key indicators to me. If we're running into a deliverability issue, if like our content's not working, if all of a sudden we have emails that just aren't converting, I think that those are probably the top 3 that I look at.
Yeah, definitely. That makes sense. Great. Well, we're going to close out with a few more questions from the community. So one is, if you could only implement 3 to 5 things to grow as a one-person shop, what would they be and why?
Yeah, so I think paid media and focusing on content and creative is how you're going to see growth. I think it's really hard to see any growth without those pieces in place in this day and age. I think the other thing is list growth. So I think it's really important to have your own owned media channels and owned marketing channels, especially, like iOS 14 just rolled an update out, and like people don't really know how that's going to affect things. So I think, your owned marketing is like very important. So focusing on list growth, having like key flows in place is probably the easiest way to make like revenue in a quicker way, and have it just be, ongoing. I am a huge fan of SMS. So I think SMS is like another pretty quick win. And then I think just also focusing on product. So like, is your product actually working? Are people liking it? Are you running into issues with the product? If you are trying to launch, different SKUs, like having enough ideas in the pipeline that you're keeping things fresh. I think that those are the top pieces that I would suggest if you're trying to like really scale a business.
Yeah, those are great. Obviously, we are huge proponents of own marketing here, especially like you said, with the iOS changes and everything coming. So such an important point for people to be thinking about right now. Someone asked in the chat, what are the other tools in your email marketing tech stack that you sync with Klaviyo?
So we use Shopify, obviously. We have Recharge on our site. We are using Just Uno for pop-ups right now. So I've used Klaviyo pop-ups and Just Uno. Both are like great options. Those are probably the key pieces that we have integrated right now with our Klaviyo account. And then we're lucky in the fact that we have a pretty developed web team, so we can have them kind of pass over different custom properties as well. I have used in the past Octane AI, which is like a great option for quizzes and has an integration, I'm pretty sure, with Klaviyo. But those are probably the key ones that we have live right now.
Awesome. Yeah, a few people asked that question, so people are excited to learn what you guys are using.
Totally.
And then you were talking a little bit about like deliverability. So how often do you go through and clean your lists and segments?
So we are looking at our like unengaged and kind of sunset lists on a monthly basis. We don't necessarily delete email addresses out of Klaviyo right away. We'll kind of try a string of different win back campaigns or the flow over maybe like anywhere from like a 3 to 6 month time frame before we decide to actually like suppress someone. And then I think the other thing that we look at is, if someone is showing as like highly unengaged, but they purchased maybe during Black Friday or Cyber Monday, sometimes I'll put those individuals in a different segment. So that come next holiday season, I can try to get them to convert again, because there could be a chance that these people are just only wanting to shop when you have like your best deals going on. So I think there's like a few different things to look at, but a 3 to 6 month time frame is probably a good idea to make sure that you are, only sending to people who actually want to receive emails on like a more regular basis.
Yeah, definitely. That's a great way to keep your list healthy. And I think that's probably a great cadence of looking at those lists and keeping up with it if people are kind of unsure where to start when it comes to like list cleaning and deliverability.
Right.
So last question for you, and then we will move on to the next part. Do you have any tips you mentioned that you're doing a little with SMS. Do you have any tips for SMS? How do you use it in a way that's relevant to your customers right now?
Yeah. So our customer base, because we find our customers so engaged in social media, I think that's a pretty good indicator that they will also be engaged in SMS. I think it's like safe to say that it's fairly similar audiences who will be engaged in, SMS as your social media accounts. We have most of our key flows set up on SMS. So pop-up that collects both email and phone number, welcome flow in SMS, abandoned cart flow in SMS, different key flows. And then we're sending out campaigns as well on the SMS side. So we'll use it for kind of like first dibs. So if you're an SMS customer, you're considered more of like a VIP customer, just in the sense that we think you're more highly engaged. So sometimes we'll launch on SMS maybe a few hours before we launch on email, for example. Those are just a few different ways that we use it. But I think overall, just the performance that people see on SMS is pretty significant.
Yeah, that's great. And I love that point that you made that your customers are really on social media and you feel like those are very similar groups. And that's why SMS works for you. I think it shows a great understanding of your audience and your customer base, which is amazing. Great. So that was awesome. Thank you so much. There was so much information in that 30 minutes. If you all didn't take notes, we are recording, so don't worry. We'll send it after so you can catch up. Thank you so much, Drew, for giving us some tips and pointers. That was amazing.
Yeah, of course. Thank you guys for having me.
Great. So before we start in on our shower routine tips that Drew is going to give us, I'd love to know if you guys enjoyed the show today and if you would recommend it to another marketer or business owner. So please fill out the NPS survey. And then while this is up, I'll let Drew show off some of Dr. Squatch's products.
Yeah, so I asked our product team, we call them our soap makers and or hair care, toothpaste, whatever products we put out. So I asked them for some tips that they have for all of you guys regarding our products. So I think a few things that we wanted to highlight coming from the experts who actually make our products. So you guys are probably aware by now that we sell bar soap. So this is the first product that Jack launched with, was our bar soap. So it's natural, cold process. One thing that you may not know about our product is that our soaps have different levels of exfoliation. So some of them, like I have in my hand right here, sorry, my fake Zoom background, this is cold brew cleanse. So this has like a heavy grit or is like a heavier exfoliant versus like our eucalyptus soap is more of a medium level exfoliant. So the recommendation that we got from our soap makers is to actually rotate the levels of exfoliants that you use. So maybe 1 month you're using like a very heavy exfoliant, and maybe the next month you want to kind of give your skin a little bit of like a smoother, soothing feel. So you choose something with like a lighter exfoliant. So that was one tip that we got directly again from the soap makers themselves. I think the other thing that they thought was important to share is whether it be, our bar soap or you use bar soap in general, if you want your soap to last longer, you don't want to keep them in the direct stream of your shower. So it's a good idea to kind of put it somewhere dry. So we have a soap saver. So we'll put our soap on this so that it's like not directly on your shower to keep it dry so that it lasts longer. We also have a soap gripper. So this thing is actually pretty cool. You take it off and you just like stick it onto your soap. So one, it's easier to like hold in your hand so it doesn't slip out, which is great. And then it also does help with soap longevity as well. So it keeps it from like sticking on surfaces as well and kind of helps you hold your soap. So those are a few tips that they had as far as bar soap. As far as toothpaste goes, so we actually have a morning and night toothpaste, which is something that most people probably have never heard of. I had never heard about it before we launched our toothpaste. So the main reason that we came up with like this morning and night routine is your teeth need different things in the morning versus the night. So for example, like our nighttime toothpaste has more of like a clay in it so that it removes stains that, you know, come from like drinking coffee throughout the day or like your glass of wine. So if you haven't tried, you know, a morning and night routine, could be something that works for you, but that was something that they thought was a cool little call out. Hair care. So one tip that people may or may not know about, guys included, is that you're not supposed to shampoo your hair all the day or every day. So I think that women know this. I don't know if guys know this as much. I know my husband didn't, for example. So like fun fact, don't shampoo your hair every single day. It strips it of oils that are actually good for your hair. So we actually don't recommend that you use our shampoo or any shampoo every single day. So that's one small tip on like the hair care side of things. And then we also have a deodorant. So here I'm holding our pine tar deodorant, and it is a natural deodorant. I think the biggest thing to know about natural deodorants is it works. You have to know what to expect. And what I mean by that is it is actually good for you to sweat. So a natural deodorant, you might still sweat, but this will be like absorb kind of the moisture, but it'll still allow your body to sweat and kind of get out all the nasty chemicals. And the tip for a natural deodorant was to apply it pretty quickly after you shower. So shower, use your towel, dry off, then use the deodorant. Don't wait like a few hours before you use it. That was the tip from our product team on our deodorant. So hopefully that was helpful. Hopefully you guys didn't know all of those things already. I didn't before I started at Squatch. But yeah, that's what I have for you today.
Those are great. I did not know the exfoliation thing is amazing. I don't think I've ever had more than like one exfoliator at a time. So I'm definitely gonna have to try that. And the toothpaste thing too is amazing. Like I definitely need that nighttime toothpaste for, you know, the wine and the coffee. Definitely an issue.
Yes. Yes, totally agree.
Well, thank you so much for all the tips and tricks. So before we let everyone go, we want to do our giveaway. So we're going to ask the trivia question, put the answer in the chat, and we'll select the first and 20th answers. So you can't necessarily guess who's going to win, but everybody just has to put their answer in the chat. So Drew, I'll have you ask the trivia question now if you want to.
Sure. So yeah, the trivia question that we have for you guys today is how did the Dr. Squatch founder, Jack, first come into or get introduced to cold process soap? Ooh, I see some very fast answers. You guys have good memory.
They are fast. They really are. It looks like I'm so sorry if I say this name wrong. Daisha Victorine. It looks like you were the first one to say farmer's market, which is the correct answer. So congratulations, you just won our giveaway. And then there's going to be one more person as well winning it. That's the 20th person that got it right. I think we're just waiting on figuring out who that 20th person is. One moment.
Yeah, a lot of you
that
guys
was a long
answered it.
count today. I'm getting Danae Young as my 20th.
Awesome. Congratulations. And thank you for counting that, Trevor. There's a lot to go through. Awesome. All right, everyone, we've come to the end of our time together. I want to give a massive shout out to Drew and the Dr. Squatch team. We are super grateful you have chosen Klaviyo to be your partner in helping you grow. We can't wait to see what's next this year. Also, a very big thank you to everyone who tuned in today. Much love goes out to you guys because we would not be here without you and your support. Next week, Morgan will be back if you missed her, and she'll be chatting with Greetable. So we're very excited for this episode. It's going to be a lot of fun per usual. And then lastly, you guys will get an email in a few hours with the replay. There's going to be some additional resources to help your business grow, a very generous 10% off promo code from Dr. Squatch, and then a link to sign up for next week's episode with Greetable. So have a fantastic week. See you next time. Thank you so much.